Hi, everybody. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for attending, and welcome to this webinar. Today, we will be discussing the top 2023 needle-moving strategies for government services delivery in 2023. I'm Nadia Davis, and I will be your moderator for today. For those of you not familiar with PAID just yet, let me tell you that we are on a mission to change the way residents interact with their governments and remove the friction from those interactions through our state-of-the-art, modern resident engagement platform with native payment processing capabilities that makes it smarter for government and easier for everyone. With that, let me go ahead and jump into today's presentation and introduce today's speakers. We have Kelly Davis-Fellner, who is the CMO at PAID. Kelly is a dynamic technology leader with experience that ranges from cybersecurity, data science niches, e-commerce, and GovTech. Kelly is our resident expert on the industry insights, and she has this firsthand knowledge of the data from the nationwide survey that this presentation will cover. Kelly was directly involved in instrumenting this survey, so she has firsthand insights. Kelly, it's great to have you. I'm also pleased to introduce Jean Nobile, SVP of Operations here at PAID, who also leads the customer success team. Jean prioritizes focus on high-level performance and ultimate attention to client needs. Talking to multiple clients that PAID supports today, Jean will help us validate the survey findings with what we actually see out there in the field. So Jean's insights will be invaluable in today's discussion. Jean, it's great to have you. With this, let me turn this over to Kelly, who will kick us off. Kelly, take it away.
Nadia, it's great to see everybody today, and thank you all for making time for this. I'm really excited to talk with you about some of these topics, and I think it's going to be a lively discussion. Of course, we'll have Q&A at the end, so looking forward to your questions as well. Speaking of questions, we've got a few that we are planning to tackle in today's webinar. The first one is, what's the current state of play in digital service delivery? So what is happening in government agencies and the way that they interact with residents? Kind of what is the state of the state? Once we've kind of established that, we're going to talk a little bit about resident preferences and how do those preferences align to the things that government agencies are prioritizing in their IT roadmaps. Are they aligned? Where is there overlap? And where might there be gaps? And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you go faster? How can you accelerate your shift to digital? And what are some things that you can do that will help move the needle and make that go faster? So without further ado, I'd love to talk just a little bit about some research that we did that is providing kind of the foundation of the conversation that we're going to have today. So back in October, we ran 2 online surveys with the Center for Digital Government. They ran this survey on our behalf. And we surveyed 1,200 residents, so sort of nationally representative U.S. consumers. Of those folks, close to 90% are purchasing goods or services online at least once a month. 55% of those folks purchase goods or services online weekly or even more often than once a week. And then in parallel to that, we also surveyed government agency folks. So folks in leadership roles and business roles, as well as kind of that IT persona within state and local government agencies. We had a really nice span of kind of coverage across states and different levels of jurisdictions and cities and states and so on. So this research kind of, provides a little bit of a foundation or a starting point for our dialogue today. And I'm also excited to say we'll be reporting, we'll be publishing kind of the full report of all of this research in early February. So we'll make sure that we also get that to all of you who are here today. So that's the research. Let's talk a little bit about the state of play. One of the most striking things that we found in our research is that agencies have very aggressive goals for channel shift. So while today, a small portion of folks have more than half of their payments online, about 29% today, 64% of the agencies we surveyed want to have half or even more of their payments happening online by next year, by 2024. So that is a very, very big and aggressive goal. I think that, what we've seen, and Gina, I'd love your POV on this as well. COVID really changed the way government agencies think about service delivery and the ability to do things that maybe they hadn't thought of before using digital channels. And I think that is some of what's behind kind of this real urgency around getting more service delivery and more payments kind of migrated online. Have you noticed anything along those lines, or what are you hearing from our clients on that?
Yeah, Kelly, I would say that it's a mix of things. I think COVID demonstrated for us that we can do things online and that we don't have to do things in person. And for agencies, doing things in person is more costly. Having staff that keeps offices open can be incredibly costly before you even start contemplating what PCI compliance might cost and those types of things. And so not only does this translate into agency savings, but it also helps the government meet the consumer where they are. And so, over the last several years, consumer expectations have accelerated dramatically in that, people expect to interact with every service in the way that they order their Starbucks drink on their phone or, pay their credit card bill on their phone. They want to be able to interact in those short moments where they have a second to, quickly pay a bill and move on with their lives. And so moving to digital really enables the agencies to meet people where they are, save costs for the agency and apply those tax dollars elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of digging into that a little bit deeper, we ran across some research that Deloitte ran that talked about when people have positive experiences with a state or local government agency's kind of digital service delivery, it is a 4x multiplier on their likelihood to have trust in that agency, which I think is, huge. We know consumers prefer to do a lot of things online, but having that be a trust driver to me is, a very significant outcome.
Yeah, I might add to that, Kelly. The concept of trust between an agency and a constituent really is, do I receive what I expect to see? And am I meeting kind of the expectation? We find that most people, they want to take care of their business. They don't want to necessarily be delinquent on taxes or utilities or anything. But they need the means to do that in an effective way. And so, there are agencies across the country that experience, the dreaded Reddit thread of, hey, this water website doesn't work. What do I do now? And these are agencies, who have brought that to us to say, hey, what do we do about this? And what that really does come down to is trust and having a service that's available to fulfill the needs of a constituency that has pretty variable needs.
Oh, the dreaded Reddit thread. Everybody lives in fear of that one. And you touched on a couple of things, but can we double click on this notion of like, what are the elements to be considering, that kind of make up, we've got this kind of rough number of $15 per transaction. And of course, everybody's mileage may vary. You might be saving a little bit more than that or a little bit less. But like, what are the inputs to that kind of a calculation? What kinds of things should agencies be thinking about as they're thinking about the savings that they're going to see?
Oh my goodness, there are so many things that go into this. So the first one I would say is maintaining the office and the staff to deal with very long lines. So, when it's deadline time and you have a line out the door and, maybe it's even around holidays for some tax deadlines, keeping those offices open for extra time and hiring more staff to take phone calls or to manage the in-person transactions is incredibly high. We have clients who have made decisions to close offices to actually hire more resources at one office to help consolidate and do things like that. And what we find is that when they can bring everything online, those costs reduce significantly. So that's the first kind of obvious answer. I think the bigger one that's maybe a little more hidden is the cost associated with PCI. So we have clients who would cite that up to $10 per transaction is what it costs just to maintain their PCI. And that is not only for the training of their staff, it's for the ongoing audit. There's a lot that goes into maintaining PCI compliance. And so having a partner that can tackle that for you and manage that is just incredibly impactful to that cost savings number.
Yeah, I bet that could be quite a bit to contend with. You know,
go ahead. One other thing I would mention is the dollars associated with mail and with postage. That's another thing that our agencies have saved significantly on, is that when you can go implement an e-billing and you are no longer printing and sending mail to your entire constituency, that's another big driver of that. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was exactly the thing I was going to ask you about. Great minds think alike, I guess. But I know we've seen some math around kind of what you're saving in terms of paper and postage and assembling all of those mail pieces and stuff. And it's non-trivial when you are, mailing every single constituent, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we were doing the survey, we did actually kind of, probe into this a little bit with our government respondents. We asked them, so what's driving you to be, very keen to digitally transform payments? And we've kind of sorted these into things that where you think of as predominantly resident-facing benefits, predominantly agency benefits, and then the things that kind of are great for everybody. And, in the lead are a couple of resident-focused things. So extending more payment options, improving the experience for those residents. But then, those back office processes, they're coming in third there. So, any commentary on this? Does this kind of map to what you're seeing with our clients?
Yeah, I think, more payment options is always nice, right? Like that's the easy thing that everybody wants to do, adding an Apple Pay or Google Pay, those kinds of things. But I think that, at the end of the day, things are about, making money for the agency and collecting the dollars needed to fulfill the services or taxes, those kinds of things, and then saving money. And so the back office process is a really big thing where we see if you have staff whose job is dedicated throughout the year to, stuffing envelopes or doing things that that could be done, or not done at all. Those people can be better utilized doing other things. And so it's not a situation where you're losing staff or having to cut jobs. It's a situation where you're better utilizing the staff that you have. I think we see a big thing. The other thing I would mention from this slide is improving security. Security is an ongoing journey, and you're never done. And, I think our partners appreciate that they have a partner in that. It can be a lot to think about altogether, but certainly resonates with what we hear and see from our clients.
Yeah. Interesting. I noticed that this reducing delinquency, 1 in 4 of our respondents said that was a top driver as well. And I think, we're certainly seeing that in our client accounts as well, where that's really, kind of a game changer in terms of delinquency reduction.
Yeah, I think that, most agencies think about channel shift, right? So what % of my users who are either mailing in a check today or are coming into the office do I think can convert to using the digital option in order to really save money and accelerate the time to revenue for the agency? And reducing delinquency is a huge piece of that. So we actually did kind of an experiment with a client where we did some email campaigns around contacting just those who had delinquencies. And these specific people hadn't been contacted by email. They'd only received mail to notify them of delinquent. And what we saw, the next day, the agency had, I think, like a 5 or 6x increase in revenue. And the feedback that we received in the response to the email was, I had no idea I was delinquent, right? And in learning a little bit more about these situations with the consumer, it was that the mail had landed on their counter, or maybe the spouse had, tossed it in a pile in an office. And people were not aware that they owed, and they certainly wanted to true up and be compliant. And so we find that digital is just so successful in reducing delinquency because it brings the awareness of the owed payable to the resident where they are, right? You receive that email on your phone while you're drinking coffee, and you can easily go take care of it online. It's just very different than, when you receive a bill in the mail and it's after work and you have to feed the kids. So you leave it in a pile and deal with it later.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about the state of the world relative to online payments. So when we polled our resident pool, again, about 1,300 people, 649 of them said the last time I paid a government agency, I did it online. So that's pretty good. So, just about half of our respondents had done that. But when you kind of double click into that, the experience is pretty clunky. Like, these are pretty antiquated web interfaces with some sort of a payments module on them. Only just less than a quarter, just less than 25% had kind of what, we think of as that modern experience of this kind of wallet experience. I get receipts. I have a stored identity in here. I've got a password. I've got my transaction history and so on. And I know, you talk a lot because you own implementations for Pay It. You probably experience kind of that migration experience from old school payment online to new school. Anything you'd add there?
Oh my gosh, yes. Channel conversion so greatly depends on a seamless user experience. Of course, there are going to be less people who get all the way through to their transaction if the website is not mobile responsive, or if it's not easy to navigate and self-intuitive. And that's why we, do a lot of R&D around kind of experimenting and finding the quickest path for people to get to the end of the process they need to complete. That involves really assessing the number of steps and the number of clicks associated with the experience. But it also is, the accessibility of making sure that broad audiences can reach it regardless of the kind of device that they're on or their digital aptitude. So, of course, you are going to have greater digital results if you have that better, more modern experience. I think we do see that an aged website doesn't garner the type of channel shift that most agencies are looking for. And there are other things that come with that, including, an immediate receipt. We've worked with clients who their receipt has to be generated by a person. So that means that it's 3 days before the resident receives a receipt. Those are the kinds of things that break down the trust between the citizen and the agency, because it creates that kind of confusing experience that you wouldn't expect in a 2023 kind of digital environment. And the last thing I would say about that too is that residents recognize this as your brand, which comes to life in re-election campaigns. It comes to life in the way that they call and interact with your staff. So, demonstrating that you have that like modern brand that understands how people interact with the web really does help drive kind of people coming back every time, and people setting up things like auto pay, because it does generate that trust.
Yeah. All comes back to that trust, right?
Right.
Well, we also asked, our agency respondents to give themselves a grade on kind of how do they think they're doing service delivery, and nearly 60% of them are dissatisfied and want to do it better and make that experience much easier, which I think is not surprising at all. I'm curious why, it's clear people realize in government agencies that it could be better, but like, what's holding them back? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the first thing I would say is that it doesn't surprise me that so many think it could be better. And that's because the public servants we work with are the best people that I have worked with in my career. And I don't say that lightly. I mean that, in that they want good things for their community and they have high standards. And I think that's something that really resonates with our teams and is exciting and enables us to continue to challenge the status quo. Why do people feel this way? I think, we all interact with consumer experiences every day. And I think the municipalities we work with probably don't have the kinds of resources that they need to deploy modern experiences in the way that a Fortune 500 would. And I think that's really at the core of what we want to help them accomplish as a business, and that we value that. We value those communities and the people who lead them every day to make them better. And when we can help an agency collect revenue at a different pace and, shore up on delinquencies, and that means that they can go build a library or a playground for their community, that means something. That's impactful. And so I find that the leaders of these agencies that we work with are incredibly ambitious and know things can be better for their community. And I think they really haven't had the resources to be able to tackle that. And it's part of why we try to bring things to them in such a way that can be deployed in a fairly seamless way that doesn't require significant agency resources.
Yeah, I know a lot of times when, we kind of have those conversations, people are surprised that they can make the kind of progress that they can with a solution like ours. And, I would reflect to, your comment about just how much kind of passion there is for service and this desire to do it better. That has absolutely been my experience too. Every time I'm out talking to clients, that's clearly something they care about. And at the end of the day, they're consumers too. They shop online and are used to much more modern interfaces than they've, been able to deliver. So it's not necessarily that surprising that they would want to do better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about how you get there. We've got kind of 3 big needle movers for digital government. We're going to do a spoiler first, and then we're going to dive into each of these. So we've got 3 of them. The first one is focusing on a resident-centric experience, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. The second one is really about thinking about the front end and the back end of these systems a little bit independently and realizing that you don't have to hold improvements to the front end back while you wait to modernize your entire back end where you've got lots of systems that need to talk to each other, et cetera. And then the last one is what it really takes to drive adoption and how do you actually get those kind of channel shift objectives that folks are really keen to have. So with that, we will dive in on number 1, and that is the resident-centric experience. So 3 kind of, high-level concepts, and we've got a few data points to share here as well. But first, let's just talk about these 3 things. So the first one is designing for ease of use and accessibility. And Jean, you touched on this earlier, but about how do you create kind of a human-centered design approach to whatever that interface is like and that UX, and like what are the considerations there? What comments would you add?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is listen to the data, listen to consumers and listen to the data around their behaviors. I think, doing this in practice for many years, we have learned around how to reduce the number of steps to accomplish the same experience, right? How to make sure that an experience is accessible to all audiences. And that means not only devices, but it also means, the Section 501 compliance, those kinds of things. So being thoughtful about the most seamless user journey is something that we can map together, right? As part of understanding business rules and those kinds of things in an implementation, really mapping that user journey to understand how are people coming to need this service, and then what do they need to accomplish it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Our second thought here is creating confidence. And, the thing that comes to mind for me was that scenario we talked about when we were looking at the donut chart of you put your credit card in and it's like a black hole and you have no idea. There's no feedback loop and you're on this ancient website. And how does that, it's a little bit hard to kind of foster trust with that or reassure people, particularly people who are maybe a little bit more kind of digital hesitant. Anything you would add there?
I mean, I might refer back to the receipt example that I gave earlier. I think, when users don't receive that confirmation that, yes, this happened, they're going to go and do it again, right? They're going to say, oh, I must not have paid. I need to, go back and try again because I didn't get a receipt. Confidence and trust go hand in hand, right? And so when that happens, you probably result in people making duplicate transactions against things, right? That's something that we would never allow to occur because we want to make sure the user has that token of, yes, I got your payment, right? And when they log back in, they can see, oh, it shows that I paid, right? So that confidence is really generated by having the kind of experience that you would expect to see.
Yeah. What about this last one? Offer choice, but not too much.
Yeah. So I love the not too much on this. I think the way I would describe that is you want to accommodate your various personas, right? There are going to be the people who feel very strongly that they want to come in and they want to see the person take their card. And, you know, they want to hold that receipt and drive it home with them, right? And put that receipt in their folder. There are people who have that kind of desire and, you know, creating choice for them to come in person or even call on the phone and do an IVR payment or be able to do it, you know, on their laptop or on their phone or on their iPad. You want to create those different channels. The not too much part of it, I would say, is, you know, sometimes agencies want to create choice on the web to say, oh, well, you know, I don't want users to have to use this one website. So like maybe I'll create 2 websites. And what we see from that is that it is very confusing, right? That generates significant call volume. That generates lack of trust of like, oh, is one of these websites not official? There are companies whose business is to like create a website and then in the background use the official government website. We've had a few customers who've run into problems with that. And by having more than one website, you create that optic that one of them is not official. And so that offer choice is like enable the right channels for your audience, but be sure to not cause the confusion by having too many ways they can pay that the user starts to wonder like what's real and what isn't. And maybe I would further that with, you know, in 2023, there are things like phishing attempts. There are people who, you know, send text messages saying they're a government agency with a link to click that is a phishing attempt. And so like by offering too many kind of digital experiences, you run the risk of creating that optic with your constituency.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's tackle this next slide. So one of the questions in our resident survey was just, aside from, you know, having very stringent security, which we know is absolute table stakes. So we wanted to set that aside because we knew that would always be number one. But besides that, what features are the most important to you when you're making a payment to a government entity? And, you know, unsurprisingly, making it fast and easy to kind of complete that transaction was in the number one spot. But I think there's a couple of other ones in here that really struck me as interesting. That notion of a digital wallet with that sort of, you know, stored account history and transactions and receipts and things like that, paying with a preferred method, and then also having your payments processed right away. Those all kind of led the pack here in features. You know, it's one view into kind of what agencies should prioritize, although, you know, we'd certainly counsel any agency to survey their own constituents to kind of understand, you know, what they ought to be prioritizing. But any surprises here for you?
I don't know if there are any surprises. I think, you know, something I might say about the digital wallet is having your, you know, digital registration and proof of payment and receipts in one place creates ease of use later. Like you're really grateful for that when you have it. You know, I live in a state where we have digital registration on our phone for DMV. And that is an incredible thing that like you never knew how bad you wanted that, because it's an easy thing to reference. Even if you just need your VIN or some other piece of information, it's there on your phone. So it's super convenient. I think for things like property taxes and utilities too, having that proof of payment right there in your wallet all together, you can see all your history. That is also just like so reassuring and nice to have. I think, you know, some of the more older websites where it's just kind of a one-stop, you come to pay, maybe you get a receipt, maybe you don't. I think that again kind of breaks down that trust. And so not surprising that the digital wallet is there, but I think it is so much more useful than we realize when we're just talking about it, and that it really does build that trust because it's there, right? And it doesn't go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we took some of those responses and then said, okay, how does that compare to what agencies are prioritizing? So this is kind of a little bit of a complicated chart. So we asked, what payment features do you offer today? So that's what's in this kind of darker pink shade. And then we asked, what do you expect to add or enhance over the next 1 or 2 years? And that's what's reflected in the kind of lighter pink with the totals of, you know, the total percentage of agencies that's planning to deploy these things kind of there at the end. I circled here in green the two where kind of the percentage of agencies that were prioritizing something kind of matched to the level of interest among the residents we polled. But then take a look at this. There's, this kind of set of 5 things are places where agencies are not prioritizing stuff that residents are saying are a priority for them. So kind of that immediate payment processing, those digital notifications, which you mentioned that are so powerful, installment pay, that wallet experience, as well as that stored transaction history. What's going on here? Do you have some thoughts on, kind of what might be amiss?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, a lot of these things go together, right? So digital notification and reminders along with installments and digital wallet, right? Like those are all very modern features that, again, I think agencies probably have not had the resources to go deploy to their residents. I think auto pay is one where, that is a major convenience for residents, and to be able to kind of set it and forget it is probably another piece of that like modern experience of something you would expect from a consumer grade experience. And then I think text to pay maybe goes back to kind of like so many choices of that may be a great thing in the future. Is it so needed now? Not sure, right? We have so many other options, whether it's point of sale in an office, IVR in a phone, digital across mobile and native applications. And so that's probably one of those that falls into the like yet another thing category that may be further down on the list.
I'm going to put you on the spot, but if you had to pick one of these things circled in red as something that you would advise an agency to kind of bump up the list, is there one in particular that jumps out to you as like, oh, well, if they would just do XYZ, that would be really powerful?
I think the government digital wallet actually like comprises all of these things, right? So like if you do that one, you get most of these for free, right? You have a digital wallet, it should come with the notifications and the reminders for payment, right? It should have that stored transaction history. That's what a wallet does and is for. And then the installments piece, like I would maybe kind of match that with auto pay of allowing users to pay in pieces is certainly an inclusionary approach, right? Not everyone can afford to pay their full property tax bill in one go. And so providing the ability for people to amortize that over time is certainly something that would motivate residents to engage further. And then they're always coming back, right? One more thing I would maybe mention about that digital government wallet is something that you should expect with that too, is the ability to communicate with your residents. So there are probably things that you need to notify your constituency of where you don't have the, email database or the tooling to have the campaigns or maybe even the design resources to build the campaigns to communicate with your constituency about things that are maybe not even payment related, right? And so that digital wallet enables you to do so much more that's inclusive of this list, but also exclusive and in addition to this list.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the things that jumps out to me, and this is a great kind of jumping off point for our next needle mover, is, these agencies are constrained. And as much as we're talking about this sort of resident facing experience and how do you modernize that, there's, oftentimes a lot of complexity on the back end. And so let's kind of use that as a jumping off point for this number 2 here, which is this concept of you can actually, if you sort of decouple your front end from your back end, right? Knowing that those back end systems of record, that's a lot more complex to update. Like, is it really possible? Can you actually really decouple these? I know we talk about this a lot, but we encounter skepticism when we talk about this. So let's break this one down.
Sure. So maybe I'll start in the middle with prioritize open integrations. And that kind of speaks to both ones on the end here in that, a system of record is a big investment for an agency. And it's a big investment, not only financially, but also for the time of their staff. And those systems of record need upgrading as well. And that can also be costly. But I think what we run into is agencies being fearful that integrating with something on the front end is going to depend on them doing something more on the back end. And what we've experienced is that there are so many different ways that a front-end system can talk to your back office system. So, many back office systems come with an API toolkit, and that API toolkit may cost extra. And that's great if you have the funding to have that real-time connectivity. But something to keep in mind is that, the data within that system of record is yours. It is the agency's data, right? And every system of record has the ability to import and export. There is the ability to schedule importing and exporting. And so find a partner on the front end who will work with you and will consume whatever it is you can import and export to really create that good user experience that you need. And, the other part of trust is that the data is correct, right? Is that it's up to date. And so, work with a partner who's going to consult with you on those integrations and is going to help you understand, okay, this is the data that we need for, processing a property tax payment versus a utilities payment versus a driver's license renewal, right? And not all information must be reported in real time, right? So if you have an API that exposes some information from your system of record, but not all, there are other data points that may not need a real-time integration. Maybe it only needs to be refreshed daily or maybe every few hours, right? And so find a partner who will work with you on that to say, okay, you know what, we're going to update this once an hour, but you don't have the resources to build an API. So we're going to build some automation for you that takes care of it. I think remembering that that's your data and you have the ability to pull it in and out of that system of record and update it appropriately is really an important piece to thinking about your integration strategy. And then maybe the other piece that kind of goes hand in hand with that is something being composable. And when we say being composable, I think what I think of the most is that, not everything requires major software development, right? So find a partner on the front end who can have, a business analyst come sit with you in your office and configure kind of what you need that user experience to be and consult with you on what data needs to power that user experience so that it can kind of compose that experience that is appropriate for your business rules and your residents. And then knowing that things are going to change, right? We all experience legislative mandates that come down that we say, okay, we have to respond to this. And in order to respond, we have to make these changes for this specific use case, right? Find a partner who's going to work with you on those things and is going to have the ability to, again, have that person sit with you in your office to know or sit with your team, I should say, to know what changes need to be made, allow them to test it out, and then have it ready for you by the deadline.
Yeah. And I think on this start small and scale, we've had lots of clients that start with maybe one use case where it's easy to kind of get that done and then realize, okay, is this extensible to other types of payments or things like that, and then kind of grow from there. Sometimes that can be a nice way to sort of prove things out, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our digital journey for everyone is a long one, right? And you have to start somewhere and iterate. And I think, our methodology around implementing is let's start with a service that makes an impact, right? Let's start with what your biggest pain point is and where the most kind of cost or consternation is from a process standpoint so that we can help the most users first, right? And then there are going to be other edge cases or other services or other kind of use cases where we want to open that up online digitally as well. And we can continue to add those. So finding a partner that has that kind of ongoing, wants to work with you on added services is a really important part to starting small and adding on so that you don't have to start with an enormous project, because the reality of the agencies we work with is that, they have a lot of projects as it is, right? And they probably don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to building something that's huge, right? So start with something where you have a partner who will do most of the lifting and will, create the most impact first, and then continue to prioritize the things that have that next benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So once you get a solution in place, what happens next? And this one's near and dear to my heart, of course. This is not if you build it, they will come kind of thing, right? It is an ongoing thing to drive adoption. And you do that with effective marketing, which is, almost nobody's number one job who works in a government agency, but it is, very, very doable. And, my advice is to sort of first think through kind of who is your audience, who is your, what are the right ways to reach them? So the right channels, and then what is it that they need to hear? We can kind of dig into that in a minute. But I think, on this audience, what I think the first step is to say, who is most likely to make a channel shift and how do we reach them, right? And who are the first people we kind of want to, speak to or whatever. And then where do we find them? How do we reach them? Where are the, what are the right channels? And then again, back to that, what do they need to hear? Why, thinking through, okay, if this particular audience, maybe is concerned about security, or maybe this particular audience is just unaware, or this particular audience needs to hear about it in a publication that they really trust, or things like that. So those are some of the kind of early things to think about through that. I've got some ideas on the next slide, and I would love, Jean, for you to kind of jump in here too. These are some of the things that we have seen from the agencies that we've worked with that have achieved really great results in terms of driving channel shift. And first and foremost is understand your current channel composition and then set goals, right? Like, what is realistic? How many folks will you move from, maybe your IVR solution into digital, or from foot traffic in your agency offices into digital, and kind of setting those goals so that you have a little bit of a yardstick to measure yourself by. And I know, Jean, that's something that we kind of coach our clients to do pretty regularly, right?
Sure. Yeah. You nailed it when you said kind of consider where you're starting. So if you don't have these services online today, and this is the first time they're online, converting the channel shift is going to be much different than if you already have an audience and are looking to expand that audience. So thinking about kind of where you want to make the change, if you want less people coming into your office, or if you want less people mailing checks, right? Like, that's an opportunity to identify kind of what audience, needs the most kind of attention in terms of communication. And then where can you find that audience? And I think this goes back to the human-centered design comment that you made earlier, Kelly, which is understanding the user journey for everyone and knowing where is this person starting? Where are they finding this information? How are they being made aware of the bill to begin with? And then how are they made aware of their options? And that really helps us go down the path of understanding where to optimize the tactics around whether you need a QR code somewhere, or whether you need signage, or maybe even an email reminder. Really all depends on kind of where you're starting with your audience, and then how to iterate and grow.
Yeah. I think, thinking about some of those foundational tactics, to kind of answer your question of like, what do they need to hear and where do they need to hear it? We've definitely said, we always advise sort of, here are your basics, right? Put a QR code on the bill, on the envelope, put an insert explaining the service into the bill, putting signage in your office. These are some very basic things that any agency can do, right? And there's also, all of these other kind of communication streams that you can piggyback on, things like your 311 music, or if your city or county has a sustainability, program that you can kind of piggyback on. Are there other PSAs you can run? Anything else jumping out at you is like, if you do nothing else, do these things?
I would say really think about your home website. So, the most credible place the person is going to go is your .gov website, right? That has the brand kind of credibility associated with it, and being thoughtful about being really upfront there about where people need to go, click here to pay, or pay your property tax here. Those kinds of things make an enormous difference. Of course, outside of making sure that it's very visible on the bill when people receive that amount due.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I ran across some research recently that I thought was really interesting. Some researchers did a double-blinded, very large study where they compared different approaches to trying to drive channel shift in terms of the messaging. And what they found was if you combined informative content that says this is how you pay online with what's called social norm nudges. So things like, 80,000 of your neighbors are already doing this, or things around the sustainability benefits, or, put your taxpayer dollars to good use. So these kind of social nudges, when you mix those two things, so tell them how and give them kind of a social nudge that gives them a why, that is where they see kind of the highest channel shift rate or the highest conversion rate to digital. So I thought that was very interesting. We'll be, certainly as we work with our clients, kind of bringing that insight into some of the work that we do when we help folks kind of plan adoption initiatives. And then I think our last thought here is just, think big. This is not it'd be great to have 10% of my transactions online. We have seen far, far better results than that. And I think, Jean, you might speak to this one because I know you see a lot of great results yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say you can exceed 90%. We certainly have customers who, I think like 97% of their transactions go through their digital offering, right? And that's really a demonstration of people want to pay online, right? And, there are ways to kind of incent users to do that as well. I think when you were talking about some of the social norm themes, I was thinking about clients who have done a Go Green campaign where they're really advocating to their consumers the going green and kind of cost savings for their community of, signing up for e-billing and paying online. I think, reminding them that is really common and that kind of, 70% of your neighbors or whatever the right number is do this is certainly one that is a motivating factor. But I would say think big, have high ambitions, and that it's absolutely achievable. And it's something that we love to work with our clients on and bring their kind of passion project to life.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's review our 3 needle movers. Got to make that experience very resident-centric, so it drives trust and confidence and is kind of designed to foster channel shift and engagement. The second one is remember that what's happening on the front end and the back end can be separated. And my favorite thing that you said, maybe for this whole thing, besides the 97% channel shift, is you own your data, and there is a way. And then finally, driving adoption with marketing campaigns and programs. And remember that if you build it, they will come, but you need to tell them about it, right? So with that, I think we can probably